It'll come to no surprise to viewers of this channel that I very much like delving into obscure media and Adult Swim content. That's all well and good, but there is at least one Adult Swim show that I have very fond memories of, despite the fact that almost everyone I've talked to has never heard about it. That show is Perfect Hair Forever. Originally premiering in 2004, Perfect Hair Forever aired for one season, sort of, ending its initial run after only 6 episodes. While it featured the same surrealist humor found in other Adult Swim shows, this show also drew a large inspiration from spoofing anime. This is a welcome satire for Adult Swim which, in addition to airing their own original content, were also well known for airing anime shows on the Toonami block. In tune with that satire, Perfect Hair Forever was also significant for being one of Adult Swim's first shows to be completely serialized, with the plot of each episode carrying on over into other episodes. There were shows like Home Movies and The Venture Brothers which kind of did a few running story arcs, but not on the same level as this, at least not yet. The Venture Brothers did play a lot with serialization in the subsequent seasons of its show, but only the first season was out by the time Perfect Hair Forever hit the network. But if this is actually somewhat of a significant show in Adult Swim's history, why does no one ever talk about it? I have no doubt that Perfect Hair Forever's brevity largely contributes to its obscurity. Even by the standards of a single-season Adult Swim show, 6 11-minute episodes is a really short run. This was certainly a case of a blink-and-you'll-miss-it TV series that barely even got a chance to find an audience. Well, what's so strange about that? The show had a brief run, didn't reach an audience, and was subsequently cancelled by executives. That's nothing special, it happens all the time. Well, the caveat in this situation is that Perfect Hair Forever was actually a creation of the network executives themselves. That's right, Perfect Hair Forever was created by 3 people. Mike Lazo, the head of the network and creator of Space Ghost Coast to Coast, Matt Harrigan, the vice president of digital content, and as John Benjamin describes him, a Lazo lackey, and Matt Maialaro, the co-creator of Aqua Teen Hunger Force, who eventually went on to also helm 12 Ounce Mouse. So yeah, this wasn't a show penned by a few unknown talents at the time. It was written, directed, and produced by 3 of the biggest names at the network, who were behind some of its most iconic content. With that being the case, what the hell happened here? Why did Perfect Hair Forever fall into obscurity so quickly, and while we're at it, is the show any good in itself? Let's jump into it and find an answer to both of those questions. Perfect Hair Forever's pilot originally aired on November 7th, 2004, which turned out to be one of the messiest premieres in the network's history. This was a date that was actually highly advertised by Adult Swim. In fact, many commercials and bumpers were appearing to promote the date, a practice which is common for upcoming pilots that are really big on the network. With so much hype going into it, fans excitedly tuned into the network that day and waited to watch the pilot premiere of Squidbillies. Oh yeah, the premiere date was being hyped up a lot, but the show that most viewers expected to see that night was not the one that they got. Basically, the pilot episode of Squidbillies was scheduled to premiere in the 11:30 time slot that night, but due to continuous production delays and rewrites, it was not ready by the time of its release date. Despite this, Adult Swim continued advertising the pilot right up to the date, and on November 7th, immediately before the Squidbillies pilot was supposed to premiere, Adult Swim aired a new bumper which read the following: "We know we've been talking about this Squidbillies project forever. That's because we've been working on it forever. We just wanted to make it perfect. For you. And your hair. Forever. Perfect Hair Forever. Amen." After this, viewers expecting the Squidbillies pilot were greeted with a title card for a Space Ghost episode supposedly named Perfect Hair Forever. This was obviously intended to be a one-off gag that would subvert the viewer's expectations when they watched the Perfect Hair Forever pilot for the first time. The fact that the audience was also expecting the pilot for Squidbillies makes this gag much more multi-layered, confusing, and hilarious. After the episode had finished airing, Adult Swim released another bumper stating, "We'd like to apologize for the scheduling error," before cutting to a fake technical difficulties card featuring the characters from Perfect Hair Forever. It then transitions into a special presentation called Adult Swim Brain Trust, alternatively known as Anime Talk Show. Even though the premiere of Perfect Hair Forever had aired when the Squidbillies pilot was supposed to, that still left an open time slot for 11:45 p.m., which was its intended airtime. As a result, Adult Swim Brain Trust was hastily put together in a matter of days to fill out the space left by Squidbillies. This special is hosted by Space Ghost and features him interviewing Meatwad from Aqua Teen Hunger Force, Sharko from C-Lab 2021, and Early from Squidbillies. The idea for this special is that Space Ghost asks his guests what they thought of the show that they just watched, with none of them being able to give a straight answer, or even saying Perfect Hair Forever by name. As the special goes on, it devolves into a violent, bloody mess, featuring cameos from other Adult Swim characters, such as Zorak and the cybernetic ghost of Christmas Past from the future. Adult Swim Brain Trust was considered by many at the time to be the unofficial last episode of Space Ghost Coast to Coast, due to the format of him hosting a talk show. In a way, you could also consider it the first episode of Squidbillies, since Early appeared here before the pilot of the show even premiered. Early becomes the driving force for the latter half of this special, which I feel was a smart choice, since people were waiting to see this character tonight anyway. If anything, fans of Squidbillies really lucked out by getting this short on top of the regular pilot later. After this special concluded, Adult Swim aired one more bumper which read the following. Maybe you're wondering what just happened. Maybe you're not even here anymore. Hello? You guys still here? Did you get that joke we sent you? Hello? And now Squidbillies. So, here's what happened to Squidbillies. We lost the tape. And there was a tornado. While we overslept. Okay. So we painted ourselves into a corner. Lost interest and went on to something else. We wish you could have seen it. It was funny as hell. Funnier than that stuff we just showed you. Why would we do that? Hello? This prank did cause some confusion, with a few viewers believing that Squidbillies didn't actually exist, and was an elaborate hoax conducted by the network. That might seem far-fetched in theory, but Adult Swim did pull clever pranks like this all the time, so it wasn't inconceivable. Talk about a boy who cried wolf scenario. Despite the confusion, Perfect Hair Forever did indeed continue airing its 5 remaining episodes, starting on November 27th, 2005, a little over a year after the pilot premiered. Now that I've explained the entire situation behind its wacky airing process, at least for now, more on that later, let's delve into the actual content of Perfect Hair Forever itself. The show follows a young boy named Gerald Bald Z on a journey to obtain perfect hair at a place called Tuna Mountain. While this is going on, Gerald's arch nemesis Coffeo is trying to take over the world, I guess. He sends his troops out to stop Gerald from reaching Tuna Mountain for some reason. Throughout his quest, Gerald comes across a myriad of different characters, many of which are intentionally one-dimensional and lampoon different anime tropes. His guardian, brilliantly named Uncle Grandfather, is a clear homage to Master Roshi from Dragon Ball in both his design and lust for females. Considering this is a Cartoon Network show, I kind of wonder if the creators of the series Uncle Grandpa took inspiration from this character's name. He has an assistant, Brenda, who is a parody of anime characters that are more or less there for fan service. As such, Brenda almost never says a single word throughout the entire series, and mostly just stands around while Uncle Grandfather gawks at her. Coffeo, the main antagonist of the series, has the same design as Uncle Grandfather minus the hair. It's never stated whether or not they're related, clones of each other, or coincidentally look alike. He is voiced by the brilliant Dave Willis, who gives him a very similar accent to Carl from Aqua Teen Hunger Force. Gerald is often accompanied by a flying sentient hot dog who regularly spits out his signature catchphrase, This is a good time to bring up that the one and only time I've ever seen Perfect Hair Forever referenced by anyone was in Yu-Gi-Oh! Abridged by Little Kuribo. This series contained a few subtle nods to the show, the most prominent being the catchphrase of the Kuribo character itself. It's also worth noting that the voice of Darts from Yu-Gi-Oh! Abridged seems to be based off of the voice of Coffeo. I think it's safe to say that Little Kuribo was heavily influenced by Perfect Hair Forever, and it may have even been one of the reasons he started making parodies of anime in the first place. Although I admit that's just my speculation. There are many other prominent characters in Perfect Hair Forever, such as Catman, Young Man, Norman Douglas, Rod the Anime God, and Japanese Bear Dad, all of who serve as Gerald's companions, enemies, and sometimes both. Oddly enough, one of the most prominent reoccurring characters is none other than Space Ghost himself, who randomly pops up throughout the series, sometimes as a joke, and sometimes to actually move the plot forward. This is obviously in reference to the fact that Mike Lazo, who created Space Ghost, also co-created Perfect Hair Forever. There are a few references to other shows too, even ones that haven't appeared on the network yet. In episode 5, for example, there's a moment where a character takes a tab of LSD that has a silhouette of Skillet from 12 Ounce Mouse on it. Still, you might be wondering what the point of the Space Ghost cameos are. I know I am. I do have a theory. I have found a lot of claims that state that Mike Lazo doesn't care about Space Ghost anymore, and he's sick of people bringing it up to him. I have to admit that I can't actually find an official source for this claim, but plenty of people on Reddit, and even my own comment sections have stated this to be the case. Plus, this is the internet, so baseless claims are essentially the same thing as facts. All joking aside, if this claim is true, Perfect Hair Forever might be referencing his disdain by having Space Ghost randomly pop up, as if Lazo is saying that he'll never escape from being known for it, despite having other creative ventures. Space Ghost is also frequently getting mauled and beaten down by other characters, which further cements my interpretation. If my inklings are correct, then all I have to say to Mike Lazo is...
What a baby!
The animation for this show is really crude, which won't come as a surprise given the creator's other projects. Like those other shows, Perfect Hair Forever manages to use its crappy visuals to its favor. A lot of the mouth movements are choppy and don't match the words being said, clearly as a nod to choppy anime dubs. There are also times where the show will transition into action scenes, which are heavily anime inspired too. If I were to make a visual comparison, I'd say the style here really reminds me of the animated cutscenes from the WarioWare series. Those games combined a lot of anime-style scenes with very cartoony character designs and simplistic movements, making them visually somewhat similar to Perfect Hair Forever. This style of animation is not for everyone, but I really enjoyed it and it works perfectly here given the context. The story for the show is extremely confusing, and is often explained through the use of incomprehensible monologues. The plot of Gerald heading to Tuna Mountain is simple enough, but the show introduces so many characters with branching stories of their own that override that straightforward narrative. For example, as previously stated, Kafio is Gerald's mortal enemy, and is trying to destroy the world. This makes no sense because Gerald's quest for Tuna Mountain has nothing to do with Kafio's supposed scheme. While this is going on, Young Man is on a quest to win Brenda's heart, which results in him finding a magical hamburger necklace, and getting wrapped up in a war between cats and hot dog buns. It's really unfocused and out there, but in a really funny way. The show to me is clearly trying to emulate the feeling of jumping into a long-running anime series like Naruto or Bleach on the 200th episode, and not being able to follow any of the storylines that are going on. If you jumped in on the 5th episode of Perfect Hair Forever, you might only be slightly more confused than someone who has watched it from the beginning. Things often happen for no discernible rhyme or reason, and plot points often get dropped completely or forgotten about until a later moment. It's taking the concept of creating a nonsensical, baffling narrative and playing with it in a really smart way that gives the attentive viewer a lot to pick up on. It's not just random for the sake of being random like a lot of lesser shows. There's a very clear method to the madness here which I really appreciate. The show gets so sidetracked with these subplots that Gerald doesn't even appear in one of the episodes, despite being in the opening and closing credits. On that note, this is a good time to bring up that every episode of Perfect Hair Forever features a different opening and closing song performed by various artists. This includes the Japanese noise rock band Melt Banana, local Georgia band Widespread Panic, and even Brendan Small of Home Movies and Metalocalypse fame. His song for episode 2 really reminded me of the Franz Kafka song from Home Movies, which made it even better for me. All of the music featured is really good, and successfully emulates the wacky and insane intros and outros of many anime series. The 6th episode of Perfect Hair Forever, and the final one of the season, is almost as big of a fuck you as the premiere was. Despite the fact that the story had not been resolved, the episode is basically a series of vignettes featuring the characters parodying sitcoms, horror stories, variety programs, slice of life series, and musical numbers. There's then a twist at the end that I guess implies the show is being controlled by Japanese businessmen, who are throwing a hodgepodge of anime cliches into a blender for viewers. I think. This ended up being the most out there episode yet, in a series jam-packed with offbeat humor. Season 2 of Perfect Hair Forever was apparently supposed to be comprised of 16 episodes, and be broadcasted online at Adult Swim Video. According to statements from Adult Swim, the creative team lost interest in continuing the series for a second season for whatever reason. Lazo and Harrigan had their hands busy running a network, and Mylaro already had Aqua Teens to work on, along with his upcoming show 12 Ounce Mouse, so I can kind of understand why. Regardless, this seemed to mark the end of the series, leaving Gerald's quest for perfect hair unresolved. Until a 7th episode popped up on Adult Swim on April Fool's Day in 2007. Was this the finale fans were waiting for? Sort of. It does indeed pick off from where the storyline left off, but this episode ends up being even more of a mindfuck than the ones that aired before it. Many points of the episode feature the characters breaking the fourth wall and referencing the fact that this was produced for the internet. The problem is, it actually aired on Adult Swim as an April Fool's Day joke before that, so it doesn't really make any sense. But of course, they kept it in knowing that it wouldn't make sense. Here, Gerald apparently does get the perfect hair that he desired, but the forest suddenly becomes flooded, ending the series on another cliffhanger sprouted from a random conflict. But the April Fool's Day prank didn't end with the premiere of the episode. Following it, Adult Swim decided to air the other episodes of Perfect Hair Forever in reverse order, and with the addition of poorly translated subtitles. This is an obvious parody of fan-made anime VHS tapes that featured out-of-order episodes and laughably bad English. Sometimes the subtitles at the bottom are slightly altered from what a character is saying, and sometimes it's a totally different conversation. Other times, the subtitles are even in Japanese. The videos for these episodes also are in much lower quality than other available episodes, in an attempt to further emulate an old VHS tape. April Fool's Day of 2007 belonged to Perfect Hair Forever on Adult Swim, and what a way to celebrate the holiday, as well as the series at the same time. Of course, it confused the uninitiated, but that's always kind of been the point. After this fateful day, Perfect Hair Forever was never heard from again. Until 2014, 7 years later, when they've once again aired a new episode on April Fool's Day. This surprise 8th episode takes place 8 years after the events of the original series, and seems to both simultaneously retcon and build upon where the story left off in episode 7. Gerald apparently failed on his quest as Uncle Grandfather actually blew up Tuna Mountain before Gerald could get to it. Despite this, the flood that appeared in episode 7 is still happening. Does this mean Gerald was dreaming, or is this an alternate timeline? I don't know, and I don't think I'm supposed to know. Keeping with tradition, this episode once again ends on a cliffhanger, which to this day has not been resolved. Following the airing of this episode, Adult Swim immediately aired an alternate version of it in the following time slot, which followed the same story and featured minor differences. This episode, or episodes depending on how you want to look at it, marked the final pieces of Perfect Hair Forever content Adult Swim ever produced. And no, I'm not about to throw you off again, this was actually the end. Looking back, it's hard to even say for certain how many episodes of Perfect Hair Forever technically exist. There are 8 individual episodes, but the last one has 2 cuts, and the first 6 have English subtitle versions. Does that mean the show has 8, 9, or 15 episodes? Whatever the case, Perfect Hair Forever's broadcasting history makes an already confusing show even harder to follow, which makes it less accessible, but even funnier when you break it all down. So that was Perfect Hair Forever. I gotta say, I had fond memories of this show, but upon rewatching it, it was way better than I remembered it being. The satire here is consistently on point, and there were a lot of moments where I was laughing really, really hard. If you like Space Ghost, Aqua Teens, and 12 Ounce Mouse, I really think the humor in Perfect Hair Forever will be up your alley, so long as you're also down with parodies of anime tropes. It's worth keeping in mind, too, that this show aired before the conception of YouTube, making it way ahead of its time before things like YouTube Poops and Abridged series made lampooning anime more popular. The voice acting all across the board is absolutely hysterical, especially Dave Willis as Coffeo, and Kim Manning, who gives Gerald an amazingly deadpan voice that contrasts beautifully with the zaniness going on around him. That being said, I do understand why Perfect Hair Forever didn't reach a wide audience. Its broadcast history was a huge mess, and even viewers who were following from episode 1 were greeted with a nonsensical story that branched off in about 100 different directions. In fact, I have a personal theory regarding this show. I think it's designed to be a deep cut for Adult Swim fans. Think about it. Not only did they use the pilot to troll Squidbillies fans, but they also kept using Perfect Hair Forever as an April Fool's Day prank, despite the fact that the majority of Adult Swim viewers do not know what it is. I actually kind of believe that the show was not meant to be successful in the traditional sense. I really appreciate a series that's able to repeatedly give its audience the middle finger, so long as it's able to do that in both a funny and loving way. Perfect Hair Forever, for my money, is kind of like Adult Swim's best inside joke. The more familiar you are with the network's history, creative executives, and programming, the funnier the show becomes. Given that Mike Lazo retired from his position as the head of Adult Swim, I don't think we'll be seeing any new episodes of Perfect Hair Forever, even as an April Fool's Day joke. Even so, Perfect Hair Forever is a hilarious series that is worth being remembered and celebrated much more than it currently is.
Hello, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that synopsis or whatever of Perfect Hair Forever. I'd like to thank all of our Patreon supporters, which is 2 of them, but including Hilly and Bran, for supporting this channel financially. If you'd like to donate to our channel as well, follow the links in the video description to our Patreon or PayPal. You can use Super Chat. That's another way. Anyway, really to support us. I don't really care. However you do it. Hell, even just watching the video supports us. So if you're watching this far, thank you. But let's see. What else do I need to cover over? Please comment, subscribe, like, hit that like button. Hit the bell icon for more notifications whenever we come up with a new video. We've got daily shorts, 2 to 3 sometimes, coming out every day. I think that's about it. Oh yeah, join our Discord. Our Discord's slowly growing, and we'd like to see a little bit more action going on there. Yeah, I guess he wanted me to add this video falls under fair use as commentary. Whatever. So keep that in mind, I guess. Yeah, until next time. Do la 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 do da. Do da la 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 la. Thank you.